Buddy-based lit analyzer, and we're going to be covering a couple films of recent note. I might throw in some Dead Reckoning as well, because we had Final Reckoning, and then we want to do the very bizarre but very enjoyable, from my perspective, Nicolas Cage film, The Surfer. Of course, I'm a huge Nick Cage fan, and we've got BLA with us. What's up, dog? How you doing?
What's up, y'all? I'm looking forward to this one. This one fits into your Nick Cage canon, and I think it's a pretty interesting movie. There's a lot to be said. It certainly fits into a lot of the stuff that you guys have talked about recently. And then if we get to the new Mission Impossible, I'm definitely looking forward to that one because we saw it today and we've got some thoughts on it. So
I do
yeah,
too. Why don't we start with the Mission Impossibles, if that's okay? Just because
yeah.
I actually think The Surfer was a better film than the Mission Impossible. I did
Mm.
not think that Final Reckoning was that great. It was kind of a lackluster showing in my view. So maybe a little bit of background of Mission Impossibles, and then some Final Reckoning, and then we'll go to The Surfer. Is that okay with you,
Yeah,
you
Yeah,
guys? Okay.
yeah.
yeah, that's
So
good.
BLA,
Yeah.
tell us initial thoughts about first of all the overall Mission Impossible Tom Cruise series, then Dead Reckoning, and then Final Reckoning.
Well, I think there are 8 parts to this, and what's amazing is that the first film came out May 22nd, 1996, May 22nd or 24th. The date is in the Final Reckoning, which was sort of added in there. And I remember, just I guess background, I remember watching Mission Impossible, the television show, when I was a kid, and I thought it was, super cool. It's spy stuff. And so then when the film came out, I had just finished my exams at school and I went with my dad, and my dad and I kind of had a tradition of going to these Mission Impossible movies, just like a Bond movie. That's kind of the thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, and it's crazy with these movies because it you know, it's been 29 years. That's a whole other thing with Tom Cruise. But I'll stay with Mission
We lost
Impossible.
you for a second. 29 years and what?
Well, it's been 29 years since this first one came out, and there are 8 films, and it's really amazing because it's starting to it's really started to mirror the Bond, arc in many ways. And there's something about Mission Impossible that I in many ways I think it's better than Bond, in the sense that first of all, he's an American, so it's more relatable, I guess, just watching as a blockbuster. The movies are always blockbuster movies in terms of the movie going experience. I mean, it's a movie that I go see in the summer, and it's also consistent. It's pretty consistent throughout. It doesn't have much of the silliness like that some of the Bond movies have had with different actors, and it's the same actor all the way through. So there's a consistency with the whole thing. And the silliest thing in any of the Bond movies was the best line, which was in the Mission Impossible, was in the third movie where he said Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. I thought that was, that's like the silliness
Is
of
that the
Tom
one with
Cruise.
Philip Seymour Hoffman?
When did he say that?
Yes,
At the
yeah, yeah,
Vatican?
yeah. That's Philip Seymour Hoffman. I'm gonna get you and your family. Remember?
Okay.
Give me a
Um,
rabbit's foot.
Yeah.
Tell me where
yeah,
the
that's
rabbit's
right.
foot is.
Oh
I
my
want to
Yeah,
find
and
her.
and
I want to hurt her.
yeah.
and Jonathan Rhys Meyers, and there's so many actors that have like come through the Mission Impossible movies. But I think that my initial takeaway of this final one was that I really liked it. There's certain things I liked about it. I liked that it was a first of all, I like the message at the very beginning when Tom Cruise comes onto the screen and says, "Hey, folks," and Catherine said, "Hi, Tom." It was a personal message, and I think that
I felt it was
there are a lot
addressed
of
to me. Yeah, it was
yeah,
like I
yeah,
felt
yeah,
it. You know,
yeah. He was talking to me and you, yeah, and I think that there are a lot of things with Tom Cruise and with this final Mission Impossible that in any other movie could have gone wrong. There was a lot of exposition. There were so many plots. There's so many people involved. But the thing that I liked that really kind of carried over all that was that it seems in this movie to not be disingenuous. And the thing that I like about Tom Cruise in general is that unlike he sort of to me sort of transcended a lot of the Hollywood messaging that and it's okay. Let me put it this way: there's a lot of Hollywood messaging, which we've seen and you've covered, we've all sort of talked about, and his message has been consistent, which is, there's a movie and I want you to see it and you can have fun with it, and we made it for you, and so that's fine. That's fine with me. That's wholesome. And I liked that I thought there were Christian elements in the film. There's family, there's self-sacrifice. I liked that they took the nerd from the first movie and they sort of redeemed him. And now instead of, he says, what can I do to make up for this horrible thing that I've done for you? And the guy says, I should thank you, because I found a wife and I found purpose. And I thought that was wholesome. There was something wholesome in the film. Now there was a lot going on, and, there's a lot of exposition, and there's a lot of stunt work, and the stunt work was cool, and that's great for a Hollywood movie. But it was also, it mirrored the final Bond movie in a lot of ways, because we have an entity. We've got a Luciferian, what do they call it? It's the anti-god. It's the Prince of Lies. Yeah, and and Tom Cruise goes through kind of a Christ-like arc throughout the thing. He goes through a baptism. He gets tempted. He's called the chosen one. And in the end, it was, in many ways, I thought there was kind of a strange nuance with this, that it was in a lot of ways, it was like an anti-globalist message in the film, because they made these decisions. They made, through their free will, that they're not going to destroy everybody or do a fake flag on our own people, because when you get rid of one, then they're all destroyed. So I thought
Chad Mode is your ultimate natural pre-workout, designed to take your performance to the next level. Chad Mode is for Natty Beast alphas only. Whether you're hitting the gym, invading a favela, conquering a small village, gambling, burning the midnight oil, mogging on your coworkers, or getting banned from Facebook, Chad Mode gives you the competitive edge you need. It's as simple as mixing 1 or 2 scoops of our fine powder into water or juice, providing you with a delicious, energizing beverage featuring a burst of sweet, organic fruit flavor. Chad Mode will give you the extra edge you desperately crave. Chad Mode stands out from the crowd by excluding artificial flavors, preservatives, sweeteners, and dyes. We've even avoided so-called natural flavors, ensuring a clean and effective formula. Only soy boys and betas guzzle blue dye and sucralose, further tanking their already low testosterone levels. Chad Mode is made in America. Unlike your common TikTok peasant's pre-workout powder, it does not contain Chinese lab-made caffeine and artificial sweeteners that soy boys so often crave. Experience the pure goodness of Chad Mode with Blue Magic registered trademark organic blue spirulina extract, organic lemon, cherry, and organic maple crystals. Forget synthetic caffeine. Embrace the natural power of organic green coffee bean extract. Each dose of Chad Mode mirrors the caffeine kick of a cup and a half of coffee, delivering a surge of energy alongside essential vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and herbal extracts. Chad Mode will allow you to fire your boss and mog on anyone who opposes you. Chad Mode will give you a dominant and aggressive edge, like a lion hunting a gazelle, where the gazelle is a TikTok gym zoomer macro guzzling sucralose on the daily, edging to TNF videos. Whether you're seeking a high-potency, junk-free pre-workout or a better way to kickstart your day, Chad Mode has you covered. It's not just for men. Chad Mode is a solution for anyone ready to conquer their fitness and life goals, dominate their coworkers, and aggressively gamble their life savings. Don't miss out. Secure your supply of Chad Mode on TikTok Shop with a limited time massive discount. Elevate your workouts and supercharge your days. Chad Mode. Not for your average gym bro zoomer who guzzles synthetic blue dyes on the daily. Buy on the TikTok Shop now with a massive discount provided by TikTok for a very limited time. Buy now while this is still available. Chad Mode has been flying off the shelves because it's the first of its kind. Certified for alpha or sigma males only. Do not buy if you are a beta. We will refund your money.
I know the movie was
So
long.
yeah, I was like, "How long have we been in here?" And I was like, "I thought it was over when we got to the submarine scene."
He
It's
said,
like, "No, that's
"Is
just
there going to be another movie?"
There's like,
I'm like,
a-
"Yeah, right now."
the whole other movie right now." Yeah. So, all right. So we should just be recording. We will. Let me tell the chat this. Okay. Sorry about that. If you were watching it live, it ain't gonna happen. So we're just gonna continue with this recording, and then I'll piece the videos together. But anyway, where were we? We're talking about they need a script doctor. Go ahead.
How long?
Oh yeah. Sam said something about he was talking about A24 films and something else, and his critique was pretty good. It was like that you can go too far in terms of your vision and how your form and content. So you have to interpret the content in terms of how you're going to film the thing. So if your vision of the world is dark and cloudy, it doesn't make sense to make a film that's literally dark and cloudy, because then we can't see anything. It's too grainy and there's nothing to see on the film. You have to have a midway point between how the characters see and our point of view and the vision of the world, and something that's palatable to a viewing audience. So if you're trying to show that the global world is huge, and that espionage is huge, and that it's a world problem, you can't keep showing clips of like the nukes going off in the cities like 8 different times and get away with it. We get tired of that. And you can't have too many people to come into a story because we lose track of who they are. Now, this movie did a good job, I think, of making characters seem like they have depth, and we get to know them pretty quickly. Like the captain of the submarine, was, the guy from, what's it called? Severance, which I haven't seen, but he was likable and right away, and he gives some nuance to his performance. And if you plus he was the black man with the mustache, so he
an
was
80s black man with an 80s black mustache. By the way, did you notice a lot of Top Gun in this one?
Yes,
there was a lot of Top Gun in this, and Indiana Jones.
Yeah, there was even a scene where he's on a plane and he's about to land on the flat. You're going to land on a flat top, mister, and he's going to land on the aircraft carrier, and he kind of cringes like, oh, but we know watching the movie that we can't escape the fact it's Tom Cruise, and he had a whole series of movies where he lands on an aircraft carrier in a plane, so he wouldn't be afraid of doing that. Plus, he hangs off of an airplane later in the movie, so why would he be worried about landing on the plane? Also, there were a number of things in the film where they show a thing and then they explain the thing that they just showed, and so the exposition gets to be too much. The audience is assumed to be it's tedious.
Yeah,
so
it's treating us like we're dumb.
Yeah, so the pod that he's supposed to get in when he comes up from underwater, and and then they tell the whole story of what this thing is. This is a new technology. Then they show it, and then Haley Atwell goes, "What the hell is that?" You're like, "Well, it's the thing that they just talked about.
It's the Tom Coon pod.
It's the Coon pod.
Yeah,
and it's got the instructions on the front of the thing." So,
I like when he got into the old Russian sub from 2012, and then he pulls down this like hatch when he's underwater, and there's like a giant screen with like an on button and a battery.
Oh yeah,
like an on button and a charge the sub battery.
I liked it when the Russian said, "I have no one, not even a dog."
Not even the dog.
That was good.
So Russians don't like people. They're loners, and they don't even like dogs. That's how awful Russians are.
Yeah. But I thought I liked the film. I'm pretty generous with movies like this because we're so used to seeing just everything is so bad. Everything that comes out is so bad. And the summer movie, there haven't been many summer movies. I mean, the last summer movie that had anything to do with Tom Cruise that I really didn't like was the Twister remake. And I remember the interview with the guy who stars in the Twister remake, and he had been in Top Gun Maverick, and he was doing this interview, and they said, so what was it like when you got a call from Tom Cruise, to be in Top Gun Maverick? And he said, well, I had to think about it for quite a while. What do you mean think about it? we don't even know who you are, and they wanted to put you in a Tom Cruise movie. You just go and you do the movie. I liked the Top Gun Maverick. I didn't really like Top Gun Maverick, but I liked that it was a movie that was still made during Karanka and that it came out and that it kept movie theaters open. I think there's, I like that. But there was obviously too much in the movie. There's just too much exposition. There's too much explaining.
Yeah. Also, there was certain plot details, and maybe it was the editing, things that didn't make sense. It didn't make sense, and maybe I just missed it. But at the beginning of the film, how did Gabriel know where Ving Rhames was, where Phineas Freak was, to go find him to kill him? And then how did he know that Tom Coon would know where he was going to put Ving Rhames with the bomb? Mm-hmm. It's just sort of like, and this seemed to pop up multiple times in the film where characters would just sort of be where they're supposed to be. Like,
you're thinking you're just supposed to watch him run.
I think we're just supposed to be entranced by him running with this, karate chop run that he does.
Through Venice, running on the Serengeti, running.
A lot of running.
Yeah.
A lot of running. You pointed out before that the success of the movie is a direct correlation to how much he runs in the movie. And I think that's true. I noticed that in this movie, when he runs, he added some facial pain to his running. So he was running, for instance, away from Ving Rhames' character. I like the buddy thing. I like the buddy thing, it's like in Lethal Weapon. Like, I'm black and you're white, and that makes it more special. And I don't know.
Do you remember him running? Do you guys remember him running in The Firm as a lawyer?
Oh yeah,
vaguely, yeah.
That was like famous. Yeah.
Yeah. What movie doesn't he run in? Jerry Maguire, or does he run in that too?
He probably runs
Tropic
to Renee
Thunder.
Zellweger. What?
Tropic Thunder, yeah. When he plays the Jewish mogul, yeah.
Yeah. His best movie is, and I think, in my opinion, is probably Vanilla Sky, because he plays against type, and he plays a lot of the film with this mask on. He plays a kind of a horrid creature, and it's real acting. I like his Tropic Thunder because it's a comedy. I think that in general Hollywood, there's obviously a thing about comedic actors who want some gravitas by playing serious roles, and that can go wrong very quickly. We get very tired of that. But the opposite needs to be done more, where you have serious actors who play comedic roles. I mean, Leo should just be playing comedies. Every drama he's going to be in now, he cries in every, and I like Leo, but he cries in every movie, and it ends up being sort of the same character. So if he plays a comedy, plays something against type, that's real acting.
Yeah. Also, I would like to get into some of the esoteric themes too before we look at other stuff. I mean, some of this I talked about in yesterday's stream, but I'm going to bring some of it back up because, of course, this series has quite a few esoteric elements all the way back to the first one. For those who don't recall, the actual MacGuffin that they're after is an AI chip. People don't remember this, but the 1996 or 7 installment was actually way ahead of its time in terms of this, amorphous, unknown chip. That's the famous scene that everybody remembers where, Tom Coon gets down in the CIA facility and he's hanging over the sensor floor to get and it's over an AI chip. And I like that we went full circle at the end of this series where we're back to AI being fully advanced. It's gotten loose. It's this sort of Skynet type of entity. I didn't notice, though, going back through it until Jamie and I watched it again yesterday, the first one, or the first part of the conclusion, is that there's quite a bit to do with cryptography and cryptocurrency, which I had missed when I first watched it when it came out in the theaters a year or two ago. And I think that's interesting because it's a very Gnostic themed film, and that's not foreign to Tom Cruise films. If you watch The Mummy, that had a lot of esoteric Gnostic themes in it. This one, it's more so that Tom likes to play the sort of rebel angel figure that goes into the system to cause the chaos. He's in fact, Rebecca Ferguson calls him the incarnation of the principle of chaos in Dead Reckoning. So that lets us know that he is this sort of dark angel figure, this sort of one that fights against the demiurge that's in this film, the entity that will imprison everybody in this depopulation agenda, which, to BLA's point, I'd like that they return to the notion of antinatalism and the total depop agenda, which had come up actually in installments 4 and 5, where you had a doomsday cult of the apostles that wanted to get rid of all of humanity or reduce it to a great reset. In fact, they even use the terminology back to Cobalt and then the apostles. They want to nuke everybody, start over the great reset, and what do you know? The AI wants to do that exact same thing.
Yeah, it has a lot of similarities to the final Bond movie, you know, with Depop, Karanka. I mean, the fact that the final Bond movie was pulled from cinemas in summer of 2020 was not due to the fact that people weren't going to the movie theater. It was clearly due to the fact that the movie was about the very thing that was happening.
I forgot that. And that's a great point.
Yeah. And also that, you know, the character's name is Lucifer in the film, creating this sort of neo-Gnostic poison garden. And it's interesting about the sort of rebel angel thing, because Shea Wiggum brings that up. Shea Wiggum's character brings that up in this final movie, that, you know, we realize that you are about protecting your team, which is noble. He wants to protect the people that he loves, but it also shows in the film, in the series of films, that everywhere he goes, he's causing those very problems that he has to save in the end. And that seems to be emblematic of all intelligence operations in the first place. I mean, even at the end of the film, Henry Czerny's character like gets what do they call the thing? The podcaster or whatever the thing is.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out the different object that, like, whatever that thing is. Yeah.
Yeah, he's holding like a Game Boy.
Right, a Game Boy, yeah.
I was thinking of the iPod, and he's always trying to go rogue. Like, he can't go rogue enough from his team, from the government. He's always like trying to be like, everyone leave me alone.
You have to, right? Yeah. I mean, because nobody else knows the big picture.
Yeah, he says, you know, he even says to him, look, I'm not here because of what happened to my dad, or because of I want to gain some sort of retribution against you. We'll have our reckoning, but I'm here because you won't follow orders. And that's one of the major themes of Spec Ops and, you know, any of these people. You know, I'm covering the Narnia series right now, and even in The Magician's Nephew, the book starts off with Uncle Andrew's character, who, just like Jadis, the White Witch, says, we're above, you know, what Kurt says in Apocalypse Now, I'm above your lying, petty morality. The rules don't apply to me. So the rules don't apply to him. He has to make decisions on his own. He has to go rogue and be inventive. And that's when, you know, you've covered the history of CIA and MI6 and all these things in World War II so much. And they sort of rely on people who do follow rules or come from a certain place, but also are able to break rules when it sort of suits the need. And so his character certainly does that throughout. You were mentioning the first movie, you're right. The first movie is so beautiful. It's a beautiful movie, and it's so brilliant because it's so, first of all, it's so obviously Brian De Palma in the best way. It's a recognizable Brian De Palma film. Even the sheen of the movie, the way that it looks, it's aged so well. But like you said, it's a classic, almost noir espionage film with a pretty close-knit cast of characters, and the locations all suit the story. So we're not going, you know, on location somewhere just so we can have an excuse to go to South Africa or wherever it is. We're going to these places because the plot will take us there. And it was, the first movie is much more about like the way that the characters having this insular feeling, this interior drama that plays out in the exterior. So we can see it on their faces, the decisions that they're making. Like when he runs to the bridge and the girl's car explodes, you know, it's an explosion, but it's a thing that means much more to the character and to his team than just the fact that there's an explosion and we got to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that all throughout the De Palma one, there's these sort of iconic scenes and images, not just, you know, him sort of hanging like a spider, you know, in the spider's web of that facility in the CIA, but, you know, you've got the scenes in Prague, as you're mentioning at the beginning. You've got, you know, the the fish tank blowing up and him running. I mean, all those are really well done action sequences for a film that's not focused on action. I wish we'd have got something
and
more.
Dale die too.
Yeah, I wish we'd have got something more like that than all of this. Just sort of like, I don't know. I feel like I'm watching a Die Hard movie and I'm not watching a spy movie. But I'd rather it be a little more weighted towards the espionage stuff. But you mentioned the characters and their backgrounds and espionage. For those that don't know, Ethan Hunt's based on E. Howard Hunt, the famous spy, rumored or self-proclaimed to be involved to some degree in the JFK event. And I think now that we've had the declassification of those documents, we can see that he may have played a role, but it does seem like there was certain Middle Eastern countries that played a pretty big role. And there you go. There's one of his novels, right? And James Jesus Angleton was certainly one of the key players that appears as well with certain Middle Eastern countries. But I wanted to mention too that I'd forgotten that many of the characters, like Phineas Freak or Ethan in the story, were recruited precisely because of their sort of criminal background, right? So they're actually recruited because they were involved in shady activities. If I recall, I can't recall if Ethan really was shady or if he got framed. I think he says he was framed or something like that.
It had something to do with Gabriel before we met.
Yeah, it was like his previous, life and something with Gabriel, exactly. And am I right that Gabriel was in one of the earlier installments as a villain?
Yeah, he's in which he's in not Rogue Nation. He's in one. Yeah, he's in one of the previous ones.
Okay,
yeah.
So he had popped up before. I do like all the throwbacks in this final installment, which we knew that they would do that, but they did it without being too cheesy, which I appreciated. But I did want to mention too that in the first one of the conclusion, a lot of what it was said about the AI I thought was pretty revelatory. I don't think obviously that AI is ever going to be sentient, but it talks about, as we said, the series begins with AI, it ends with AI. We have multi-signature cryptography going on in terms of Bitcoin. That's very important. We have the mentioning that this can access and take down the Federal Reserve. It can infiltrate all networks, including nukes, every government computer, etc. It's decentralized. It's very much like the way, if you read about Stuxnet, it's like a mega Stuxnet, which is interesting because we just watched Black Bag with Cate Blanchett and Michael Fassbender, and in that film they mentioned Stuxnet, which was the Israeli let loose bug into the Iranian nuke facilities in 2012, and they mentioned that this Sevastopol, sub sank in 2012. Not that that's necessarily connected, but it's just weird that it was 2012, and in some way, we have parts of this AI that are sort of fragmented. You got to get the parts together. One of the key elements is the key, which is these cruciform keys that fit together. Very Indiana Jones-ish, very, esoteric, hermetic type stuff. And so it's almost like to control the deity is to control the tech and the secret. So you got to have secret gnosis. You got to know the secret terms, the secret words. You got to put together the puzzles of cryptography, and you can become a Deus Ex Machina, a god from within.
He went from all of the different elements to like water, air. Like he fought underwater, in the air, in the earth.
Interesting. Yes, we had underground bases. Yeah. That was I don't know if seems like we should have had underground bases in spy movies, but we haven't. This is like one of the first ones to have an underground base. Mount Weather's a real thing. In fact, Alex is always mentioning Mount Weather. Mount Weather, Site R.
Mount Weather is a famous place in Virginia that we drive past whenever we're on trips. And there was the secret base that was revealed through that journalist at the Green. Have you ever heard of I talked to Jamie about this. Jamie, remember the Greenbrier Hotel? There's a hotel.
There's a hotel with an underground base. Alex talks about this
that's
too.
Right. Yeah. And everyone I know goes there on vacation. They've always been there. And then it was revealed that, it's this thing. And and it's so obvious when you go there now. You go into the ballroom and there are nuclear hinges on the door, and you just open it up, and it's got a full, it can hold the full White House.
I don't know if you saw, but I don't mean to cut you off, but just on this point, did you see that maybe a few weeks ago, Tucker had Catherine Austin Fitz on about underground bases?
I didn't see it.
Yeah,
I saw that
they
there
did
was
a whole deep dive, and she went pretty heavy into dumbs, which we haven't heard much about. That's like 2012 era conspiracy stuff,
Yeah. There's of course Admiral Byrd and the underground bases in Antarctica. My uncle in Mississippi, who was a farmer, was in the Air Force in the 50s and 60s, and his job, he passed away, but his job, he was tasked with making a list of all the people that would go in the bunker in case of a nuclear strike. And there was one space on the end that was left blank, and he couldn't find anybody to fill it, so he put himself in it.
So on the last bunker. Okay, yeah. Put your name in there. That's funny.
Yeah.
Alex actually this week was he interviewed dark journalists, and they talked about underground bases this last week. And the only point I wanted to say about that was Alex brought up the fact that when Theo Von had Zuckerberg on, Zuckerberg was talking about his underground tunnels and base that he has in Hawaii that he had built. And Alex was, of course, talking about how, this is what conspiracy theorists have talked about for decades, is the, breakaway society that the elite have in the case of some global phenomenon.
Final Reckoning has the Doomsday Vault. They've got the Seed Vault.
Oh, the Seed Vault. Yeah, great point.
Yeah. It's also got, speaking of the esoteric, my friend Maddie and I covered the last season of True Detective, which was set in Alaska. It was amongst the Inuit, and they included that storyline in this one. Many of the films include the underground, the literal London Underground, and so a lot of these films, like you remember in Skyfall, where they go minimalist, and so then they go to this underground. It's the secret station, Churchill secret station, and that's sort of mirrored in New York. They have that train station under the Waldorf Astoria, where the president goes on the train line straight from Penn Station in case of a nuclear attack. And then there's all the ones in Vegas and all this and all that.
But LA has all these underground tunnels too, and reportedly also, as Jamie pointed out to me, even the A-list actors have supposedly sort of underground tunnel systems that they take to get to places so that they won't get hung up.
I did like in the film when they showed what was supposed to be Cheyenne Mountain, and then they showed the Minutemen facilities, and they've got like wild horses running to indicate that it's Cheyenne Mountain. So they had the nuclear football in this movie again. That the nuclear football is in everything. It's like one of those boomer points that's in every film about the end of the world, where who's in control of the nuclear football. And they had the Curtis LeMay, Nick Offerman character, who's like, just do it, 10, 20 million dead tops. And I thought what was interesting was that with Angela Bassett and that sort of cast of characters in the room, which, by the way, why did it get so sweaty? They're in the room and they come back to
it. Well, because the entity can hack the air conditioning. So
that's right. Yeah. But she says that somebody will have doubt. Somebody will try and ruin this because there'll be a doubter, basically. And it ends up being her. So she ends up being the one who is about to press the button and then decides at the last minute that, maybe I don't need to nuke everybody on Earth just to save nobody. But I did think I thought there were redeeming elements in it. I really liked the nerd character from the first one, because when they go into his place on the island in the Bering Sea, when they walked into the hut, the first thing I thought was like, wow, that looks really cozy. There's a lot of books. They got every movie ever made in this place. They're probably all Tom Cruise Paramount movies. And then, of course, like you said, the evil Russians are already there attacking. So they're in the Bering Sea, and then they got to go to South Africa. Maybe that's predictive programming for what's happening in South Africa now or something. I don't know. But it was such a contrast from the first movie, which is bound to happen with a huge series. And Tom Cruise is getting pretty old. I saw an interview with Jimmy clip from Jimmy Fallon, and I thought this was pretty good. He said, "So what's the movie about?" And he said, "Well, there's a mission and it's impossible." And so that's the movie.
Well, I forgot to, on that crypto point, when we watched the previous one, that the Haley Atwell character, she gets paid in crypto, and Tom Cruise mentions a $4 million cryptocurrency payment that's going to be given if she's able to give that key to Gabriel. And I'd forgotten that Phineas Freak, he's a cyberpunk, techno cyber pagan type of guy. And that's also the ethos from which Bitcoin comes, right? So Bitcoin comes from the cypherpunks who were, like Assange and Adam Back and these characters who were basically a kind of Ving Rhames character in reality. And at the beginning of that one, you had Simon Pegg decoding the cylinder cipher, which I liked. I thought that was really cool to go this route of like ancient cryptography, because cylinder ciphers go back to like Julius Caesar. They had those back then. And in order to open messages for the king or whatever.
Dan Brown likes to use them.
Dan Brown type stuff. And I thought it was going to go in the direction of Dan Brown, given the fact that we had the rabbit's foot being what you think is this anti-god. If you remember in the Dan Brown stories, antimatter is like the anti-god, and demons, angels and demons.
They steal it from CERN.
Yeah, it's like a CERN thing, but I like that it ended up being AI and not some stupid bioweapon or something from CERN.
Well, it was kind of a combination of the two, because the way that the entity was presented in the film was like you were looking into the CERN, into the Hadron Collider.
That's it. Yeah,
and it was an eye, but it was also, it just also had a very Lucifer, Satan tempting Christ sort of air to it, because we see he's tempted, he's offered everything in the world, he's offered complete control. We see all these sort of he says there's infinite possibilities, so we almost see like a kind of multiverse floating in front of him. He also, to do that, he essentially dies. He goes into a coffin, and the way that he is inducted into this sort of thing is like as a almost Ewan Cameron. I mean, he's electroshocked into it.
Yeah, it was like we were talking about MK Ultra when he got into the Matrix Coom pod there.
That's Masonic too.
Yeah, so it is another resurrection motif.
Going into the sarcophagus.
Yeah,
with a black Egyptian obsidian pharaoh mask.
Well, one other side note that I didn't remember, they brought this up in part 2, but in Dead Reckoning, when I went back and watched it, Gabriel is hidden by the AI when Tom Kim is wearing those Google glasses in the airport. And that's interesting because I had just, on last Friday's Lord Voldemort, I went into the Ray Kurzweil book where he talks about how when this AI rolls out and virtual reality rolls out, especially if it becomes nanotech, he says the danger is that the AI will be able to interfere and intercede incoming signals and control what we actually perceive. And he says that's the big danger, because then it's total mind control. And it vibed perfectly with what was in Dead Reckoning, and then they recalled that in regard to this Matrix scenario when Tom Coom goes into this sort of Matrix pod.
I just realized this movie is in many ways almost the exact same plot as Oblivion. Because the sarcophagus comes down, there's an entity, instead of multiple agents coming after you, it's just, they're clones. And then the sort of like the DARPA bot, drone, the hunter killer drones coming after you. There's a kind of resistance. Who lives in an underground base, in the film. But you're right. Tom Cruise does a lot of these types of movies.
Well, let me note that Edge of Tomorrow, where he does a similar sort of fight with an archontic demiurge. Oblivion, he fights the demiurge, and then I think you got similar themes here. But if you remember, when the AI reveals itself, this is something Jamie pointed out yesterday. It's when they're at we're at the rave, but they're in a church. Right. It's a rave inside of a giant. It's like St. Mark's Cathedral. Do you remember that? In Dead Reckoning, when the AI, when they have the meeting, when parties are gathered, and they're at this giant rave, it's at like a giant cathedral. So it's in a church. It's a religious. The God of from within, the Deus Ex Machina, is revealing itself at this church.
And raves and techno is part of the cyberpunk culture that all this came out
exactly.
of.
Yes,
with
exactly.
That replacing
it's computer
religion.
music.
Yeah, so they bring you the new God.
Yeah, it's the Matrix cave rave, right?
there you go. Right.
Final Matrix. Yeah. Yeah.
It's the church of the future is essentially what.
Well, doesn't it make sense? I mean, the movie really does hint on the fact that there's that one line when he's in combat when he's fighting the guy and he says, stay off the internet or get off the internet or something like that. I didn't catch at the very beginning. He said something about multiple personalities in the very start of the film,
right?
But it makes sense, with the theologically speaking, that the Antichrist seems that, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but if the Antichrist, were to come soon or something, and if just say in terms of we're watching a movie and that's emblematic of the way that it is, then wouldn't it make sense that you've talked about the new religion and this sort of religion of AI and people worshiping some sort of entity, some sort of spiritual entity from AI. And it would make sense that the Antichrist is not a created being. It's a simulation or some sort of inversion or perversion of an entity that arises out of through technology.
Well, I think that in the Orthodox tradition, we do believe that there will be a person who ends up being the final Antichrist, but it certainly could include an Antichrist beast system that definitely utilizes the synthetic and utilizes AI for large scale tracking and tracing and control. That's definitely on the table, I'm sure. But I mean, I think that I wanted to ask you a question because I just remembered that in the film, when it says multiple personality, what was that in reference to? Was it Tom Cruise giving exposition?
I think so. I think it was a reference to. It was part
of AI, right? It had multiple personalities. Okay.
Yeah, it was a reference to AI, and it was a reference to the fact that what you were just talking about with your vision of people changes. So we see a person that ends up being a different person that you're tricked into seeing. But also, that's a common theme throughout all of Mission Impossible that was pretty predictive and revelatory. I think it wasn't face swap; it was literal latex mask. And when the first movie came out, that seemed very fantastical. It seemed like something that was just only in a movie, could never happen. But now we see that that's probable in a lot of cases. I mean, I saw a picture of Tyler Perry the other day or whoever's inside of Tyler Perry in this picture, clearly with a line
Medea.
Right here where it was a different person inside of Medea, inside of Tyler Perry. It was like 4 layers of people wearing a latex mask.
Yeah, I think the. Yeah, I remember now. It's when Tom's explaining at the beginning, I guess, for the benefit of the boomer audience who doesn't remember the rest of the Mission Impossible series. He's explaining that this AI has basically become a kind of a deity. It's the Lord of Lies, he calls it later on. But he says it's multiple personalities because it can be anyone, anywhere, and change and morph into whatever.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the super spy, right? The AI is kind of the super spy because it's like, playing 66 dimensional chess. It's way ahead of you. So you get this determinism theme versus free will theme that's always been in the series. And this was another thing that Tom Cruise loves to sort of pioneer in his films. This was in Oblivion, and it was in Edge of Tomorrow. There we go. We lost him. We lost you again, but okay, you're back now. So in Edge of Tomorrow, right, he's caught in this cyclical, Groundhog Day loop, but he's fighting this alien entity that traps you in this prison, and you got to figure out the way to, undo this matrix that you're in, and it's a very Gnostic theme. I would add that Esoteric Hollywood 3 has an analysis of Oblivion, Edge of Tomorrow, the entire Mission Impossible series, except for this one because it just came out and I'd already finished the book. So Mission Impossible and all these Tom Cruise films, including Vanilla Sky, are all in Esoteric Hollywood 3. You can get signed copies in terms of pre-orders at the website right now if you sign up. But what do you make of the cyclical sort of breaking free from the determinist scheme, which is mentioned many times in Final Reckoning, because it is not written, it is written, it is not written, right? So code is written. Phineas Freak writes code that ends up being kind of the defeater for the code of the determinism that the AI wants to enforce to upset free will. Tom Cruise, of course, is the agent of chaos, the incarnation of chaos, she calls him. And so he represents this freedom, this rebellion, this revolution. He will always fight for freedom. Phineas Freak's final line is, "We are the masters of our own fate." What do you make of the determinism, free will stuff in terms of the world of Spycraft and AI and tech?
Well, I think that it transcends spy tech and espionage and films because it's an archetypal theme. I mean, it's even that the final line from Phineas is a reference to William Ernest Henley, probably my distant cousin, who wrote the poem Invictus, which is, I'm the master of my fate, I'm the captain of my soul. And one thing that always bothers me in these films is the fact that they are clearly fighting against their fated life. Like it's written, everything.
Exactly.
You're deterministic. You have no choices. But then they conflate that at the end by saying they think that fate is somehow different from destiny. And so then they say, but you're the master of your destiny,
right?
Which is the same thing. And we can see this sort of dichotomy happening all the way back into Anglo-Saxon literature. There are two of the earliest English poems are called The Wanderer and The Seafarer. They're around the time of Beowulf, and Beowulf struggles with this about, and we see these in these two narrative poems because, and many scholars think that it would be two different people who wrote the poems, because 3/4 of these narrative poems are about fate and how, for instance, the Viking never feels at home. When he's home, he wants to be out on the sea, and when he's out on the sea, he wants to be home with his family. It's the ubi sunt motif. Where are those who have gone before? There's mutability. Everyone's gone. But then at the end of the poem, there will be an explicit Christian blessing or a discussion of the way that God controls the world and sets the planets in motion. Beowulf begins like this because it begins with where Grendel comes from. Grendel comes from Cain, spawned from Cain. So it gives a biblical notion to it describes Genesis. It talks about this, but then Beowulf becomes this sort of agent of fate. But in reality, I think that that sort of sets the stage for an archetypal motif throughout literature and film, because really the poems were written at a time where.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure and take use of the promo code for the show sponsor, for this channel sponsor, which is choq.com. That's CHOQ.com. You can find the links in the description below the video. You get 50% off any of the great organic, actually better than organic supplements that they offer at choq.com. If you want to support my channel, the best way to do that is to head on over there and use that promo code J50. That's J50 to get 50% off. You can also use the recurring subscription of J53 Life. That's J53LIFE if you want to sign up for automatic recurring subscriptions on those excellent supplements. Health is absolutely necessary in combating the toxic culture that we live in. I also would say if you want to get access to my books, head on over to the shop at my website and get signed copies there. Thank you.
It wasn't a monk who found an old Anglo-Saxon pagan poem and then added something to it. It was just at the convergence, at the crossroads of where Europe was becoming Christianized. So in 800 and 1000 and 800 to about 1000 AD, you have these people who have lived in a pagan world, and they've moved to this mass migration of pagan people, and they have all this stuff in culture. But now they've been Christianized. So they're trying to make sense of how their world is supposed to be in language. And we're still sort of dealing with that all the way to now. When you watch films, you can't have, this is my perspective, I guess. You can't have people who rebel against being an agent of fate, but then still believe they are destined to do the thing because it's written. It's you have free will and you make choices, and that's part of the freedom that we're given by God. So the thing is, you either are in this journey and you do things that glorify Christ, or you are a slave to fate. And that's sort of where the conflict comes, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly the line that I was hoping you would go into some of the literary tradition on that, because in terms of tech, the reason I mentioned spies is spies obviously are important in the history of literature. More recently, the last 130 years of literature with we covered The Secret Agent by Conrad on my channel not too long ago, because it's not technically the first spy novel, but it's one of the earliest modern literary spy novels. And spy stuff actually comes to dominate society in modernity in ways that most people don't even know. Now, I know our audience knows this, but computers themselves come out of the spy world. They come out of ARPANET, ways to engage in cryptographic communication that can't be intercepted by the other party, by the enemy, by other states. AI and all of the supercomputers that we have, that comes out of the NSA and the Cold War. You have people like William Binney that Richard Grove has done many interviews and documentaries with. Binney talking about how the NSA and AI really congealed out of the Cold War and a lot of the stuff that he did for the NSA back at that time. And at that era of the Cold War, Binney talks about how it was all about the notion of freedom versus slavery. And what's funny is that even a film like Dead Reckoning, Final Reckoning, even that still harkens back to the Cold War. You have the presence of the Russians in the film being this potential villain. You have these, old, number stations and Soviets, sonar sites all over the globe that are very important for the final sequence. And the idea, I think, being that, we have to get past our, nationalist, limitations, and we got to have this new future. We got to shake hands. If you notice, that kept coming up where Tom Cruise kept offering his hand. Let's be friends. We got to trust each other. We'll never get out of this. The AI is the one that's dividing us and keeping us separated. We got to work together. So a potential sort of globalist theme there. But last thing I wanted to say on this was that also, as we said, spies come out. The world of Spycraft is also an imprisoning world. If you remember back to Secret Agent, right, which is kind of a dark satire, Verloc, who's the sort of the main tragic character, Verloc is a slave. He's handled by these people that have dirt on him and have controlled him. His handlers have controlled him, this foreign government, for the last 30, 40 years of his life. Tom Cruise is Ethan Hunt, the recruit, who is also, he has handlers, the CIA, the NSA, right, the people above him, the Director of National Intelligence. Spies are not free people. Grace goes from the world of organized crime and thievery to becoming now handled by the IMF, and that's her only option. So there's this within the notion of the spy itself is the denial of his freedom and being owned by some master, some superstate, some clandestine organization, and likewise the world of cryptocurrency also comes out of the crypto spy world as well. And we just don't even, the spy world sets the stage for where the world goes. And most of us don't even see that. A lot of the gadgets of James Bond that Q, shows us becomes normal technology 20, 30 years later. So the spy world is really telling us the future ahead of time.
And then,
there's a reason why. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, they were contrasting that with now you can't trust the digital stuff, and you have to go back to VHS.
The entity was going to make AI fake news of everything in history, and so you can't trust the internet now.
He was even using Morse code and all the throwbacks of classic spy stuff.
They had to use old tech. That's right.
Yeah, he had everything analog, and then he had put it away in his brain. He'd remember the coordinates to this place. There's a reason why Tom Cruise spends a lot of the film in handcuffs, because he's He's shackled like that. Whenever and that happens throughout all of the films, whenever he's transported from one place to another. I mean, that was one of the major plots of Mission Impossible 3, that he's constantly in the back of a black van or a Suburban, and he's constantly having to escape from his own people. And that, I think, ties into certainly the history of espionage with the esoteric and the occult. I mean, you've talked about the way that, for instance, the mob and the world of Spycraft sort of work hand in hand because of omerta. So there's a built-in code of silence and secrecy with that. And these intelligence people become sort of dark monks. I mean, you remember the Elizabeth movie, where Francis Walsingham, who's, the great father of English spycraft, is constantly pictured with these people who are, they either are literal monks or they're dressed like monks, and mixed in with, even going back to the Templars. There's the way that the system works with money and with moving people around and with, the global world at the time, and with war is mixed in with a warrior monk class that, like you were just saying with spies, the trade-off seems to be, to the average person, that these are people who give up their lives for their country. But in reality, it seems that they are selling over their soul and everything that they care about. So even Tom Cruise, I don't remember if it's in Mission Impossible or in Night and Day. He did that other movie, Night and Day, with Cameron Diaz, where they go to his house and they're talking to his parents, and his parents think that he's dead. He can't even talk to his parents. He has no family, no friends. His wife is compromised in part 3. So the closest thing is for him to take care of his team, but that's all he has. So there's nothing personal and sacred to the people that are involved in this. Like you said, they're completely shackled by their secrecy.
I was wondering too, and I just don't remember the detail. Did we not see Tom Cruise at the end with Dominique Monaghan because she had moved on, or was it simply because everyone around him is in danger? Why do we not see him back with his wife?
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, it was in, I think, Fallout or the one after, where they go to that UN encampment and he's having that fight with the British depopulation advocate. Mm-hmm. And, she's working as a UN aid worker, and they have this conversation about, oh, I've missed you, blah, blah, blah. And then I think she's moved on. Like, she's got a new dude, and he realizes it's not fair to her to, for him to pop up every 5 years and be like, hey, let's get laid, or and then see ya. You know what I mean? Like, he wants her to have a life. And so I think maybe that's the explanation.
It's also one of the themes that occurs in all the spy movies. I mean, Spy Game with Brad Pitt and Robert Redford is partly about that. The Ray Fiennes movie, where they're dealing with the VIRUS in Africa. Remember, The Constant Gardener deals with that. The people that are in this life can only be with other people in the life. And like in Black Bag.
That Black Bag, exactly. Yeah.
You can't even trust the person you're with is not going to sell you out for the greater thing. Like in Bond with M, with his mother and his daddy's state. He has no family anymore, and they are his family. His childhood is taken away. Of course, it turns out, like in Austin Powers, that his brother is the Lucifer character that they adopted. By the way, speaking of Austin Powers, probably the best spy movie with Tom Cruise is in Goldmember. You remember at the beginning of the film when he's playing the Austin Powers character in the movie, within the movie.
Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise plays Mike.
I didn't remember that.
Yeah, he plays Mike Myers parachuting into the. Yeah.
Well, I would say too. Last couple thoughts. I mean, I think the idea of AI becoming sentient is kind of stupid. I'm kind of tired of that. I think, we got that with Skynet. We know that Terminator. There was actual consultation between DARPA, the Pentagon, and Kathleen Kennedy and Gail Ann Hurd, different people involved in the later Terminators. Not so much the first one, which is almost kind of an independent film that was a neo-noir classic. But by the time we got Terminator 2 and James Cameron and working and talking to the Pentagon, I think we're getting more and more revelations of, actual plans and possibilities of where AI might go in terms of depopulation and it being programmed. And in that series with Skynet, we had the joining of Ben Witherington with the AI to be the sort of savior figure, the one that had Christian Bale. I forget where it went after that because they got really, really bad by the time of the last one with Arnold basically being a guy like the T800 becomes a blind salesman. He sells blinds and he's like cucked. And
his name's Carl.
Carl Carl the cuck who sells blinds. It was crazy. But to round it out with the idea of AI becoming sentient, you're never going to get code that comes alive. I think that's really stupid. But I do think you could have the potentiality of, antinatalist, depop agenda people, Malthusians who do want to program AI to perhaps depop, something like we see in, Avengers or Winter Soldier. You have that theme going on in those films. That's definitely a possibility, but not what we see with like AI coming alive or something like that. But,
well, I think that this all has the veneer, the veneer of like a scam, the way that it's sold to the public now. Because, like you were saying, there's this narrative, there's this ultra narrative now that is completely infiltrated every aspect of advertising and everything else that you see, where it's coming, it's the greatest thing. It knows more than you know, so there's nothing you can do about it. The stuff about like, I don't know about the NVIDIA chips or whatever, but the new NVIDIA spine that they have, which has, millions and billions of terabytes in it and has all the computing power of anything in the world and all that kind of stuff. It just seems like it's a narrative that's sold to people so that they will begin to doubt their own abilities and doubt the future and possibility of what humans can do. And no matter what, you can't get past the point that the DARPA, the Alphabet Inc. DARPA bots or whatever, the dancing robots, it's like Sam said, it looks like the video is the product. It looks like there are no bots that can go into your house and they don't have dexterity. You're not going to have bots, fixing the telephone lines when it takes ingenuity and dexterity to do those things. Maybe, we'll continue to have robots building cars and stuff, and we'll have computing power, but and we'll have a Roomba. But in terms of, mistaking that for a human being, it seems at the very least very far off.
Well, it'll just have its cult members doing everything for it.
Yeah. The self-checkout doesn't work.
Yeah, right. I know. I wish this. Go ahead.
It's just that I think also that might be part of the psyop here, which is that the more you put your faith into technology, the more at the moment where you need it the most, the internet crashes or the self-checkout doesn't work. You can't get your food. You still got to wait for the boomer lady, like in charge of self-checkout, to come and swipe the key so you can get your food.
Yeah, I wish they'd explored a little bit more of the doomsday cult that this film mentioned, but maybe they didn't care about it because they had already had sort of cult aspect with the apostles in the previous installments before 7 and 8. But I think overall it was an enjoyable series. Like you, I watched some of the old ones maybe when I was a kid, and I always liked Get Smart. I grew up watching Get Smart as a kid, so even the goofy comedic side of the spy world was something I always enjoyed. And Mission Impossible, like you said, is maybe more relatable to Americans because it's, Ethan Hunt's an American and you get this U.S. sort of propaganda element going on in it. But
I was wondering about what it's like for like a Russian to watch an American movie or a Chinese or something. Like,
I'm sure they see the propaganda in it, right?
Why am I always the villain?
Yeah, always the villain. Yeah, but anyway, yeah. So I wonder if it really is the end of the series. These series they like to milk things, and they like to do spinoffs. They like to do retro like origin stories. Oh, what's Ethan Hunt's origin story? Let's go back and do that. So
Ethan Jr.
Yeah, we might get spinoffs. I don't know, but
yeah. I think it's the end of the series, only because Tom Cruise is the creative controller of the whole thing, and I think that it's not something that is. I mean, it's like you remember when he had that act of Congress where they took away he and Christopher McQuarrie, his production partner, had that big thing where it seemed a very small thing. But when you used to watch TVs when they first went digital and they had to transfer from the screen, widescreen, onto the TV. So you're watching the scene, and when the character walks over here, it moves. And so the film stock starts to look fake, like you're watching a home video. And Tom Cruise got that pushed through and got it banned in Hollywood so that it keeps the integrity of the film stock. So when you're moving the way the film looks is still the same. It's not just letterbox, but it's small things like that. Or with the surround sound, the default setting on the surround sound when you're streaming. I think those are important things that sort of convey the fact that he has creative control over this, and it won't turn into just another money grab, because he has no reason for a money. Everything in his career kind of shows that he has no reason for a money grab. All the things that he does they already sort of turned to gold anyway. So he sort of seems to be sort of above that. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, what's your last thoughts on it, Jamie?
It was pretty sentimental. The last part 2 with all the flashbacks and stuff.
I never got my Gucci suit, Ethan. You owe me a Gucci suit, Ethan.
A little less tears from our hero. He was crying.
He cried a lot in this one. Yeah, there was a lot of.
He did.
I don't think he cried in the other ones, did he? Until now.
No.
So like he loses his wife, he loses Carrie Russell, but he cries when he loses Ving Rhames. Right.
Well, we walked out thinking like, is this his epitaph? Like, is there something wrong with him? Is he going to go soon? I mean, because this was really like a final statement. I'm never making a movie again. But it's just the final part of the series. Maybe this is because in his old age, he's becoming more over sentimental, or with like in Top Gun having Val Kilmer in it. And it's sort of, well, we got to send off Val Kilmer, and Val Kilmer's literally going to pass away. So we're going to have him in the film
Iceman
passing away. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is he okay?
I don't know. I hope so.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's go move on to The Surfer, which we saw in Calabasas when we were on our podcast tour. I really enjoyed it. It was not at all what I expected. I'm glad that I sort of glanced at the trailer. I didn't pay attention to it. So I was raw and fresh to this film, which I think this film wants you to just be raw, fresh, and just mystified. It wants you to be thrown for a loop. And that's exactly what happened. And I thought it was amazingly executed. Every aspect of it was top notch, especially the cinematography, the storytelling, the acting was phenomenal. Everything was top notch. The only thing I didn't like was that it was a little too gross for me personally. I understand that's sort of the Southern Gothic, I guess you could say, that's that you can appreciate in the film. It's part of the story, so I get it. It's just some of it is a little too gross for me. But and before we get into the story itself and the symbolism and all that, my initial takeaway was that I was glad to be mystified and thrown for a loop by a movie without expecting it. What did you think?
I still don't know what happened.
I think we are supposed to have the vantage point of a bum having a fever dream of his life, and then we don't really know what's real and what wasn't, but that was what made it great. Go ahead.
Well, and you also feel like this happened to you too, and you're like, was that real? Like,
right, exactly.
Am I real?
Yeah. What did you think, BLA?
Well, I thought that, first of all, we went to see it and we were the only people in the theater, which was not a shock. But that was okay, because oftentimes really good movies don't get a viewing audience in the cinema. And I really liked, and I appreciate that it was an original film with an original story. It was something new. It wasn't a prequel. It wasn't a sequel. And it was actually very much like a lot of films being made right now are like plays that are filmed, and it added enough sort of dazzle to the movie to make it sort of unplayable in a theater. which added a layer to it. There's a small cast of characters. There's really not that much going on in the film, but there's a lot going on in one place. And it's basically a parking lot movie. The whole thing like takes place in a parking lot with a beach down the street. And it was also both unrelatable and relatable. It was unrelatable because we're not any of these characters, we're not surfers, we're not Australian, we're not real estate people, we're not going to buy a mansion or whatever overlooking the sea, but it was relatable because it had aspects of it in terms of the interpersonality and the way that the characters work with each other that we sort of probably all go through at some point in our lives. When a guy, especially when we're younger, and we meet a new group of people, there can always be a thing where you're not in it or you're in it. And so that was relatable in a way. Now it got way, way past that because it became really a fraternity initiation going to the absolute extreme. And it was, it resembled a bunch of other movies. It resembled like a little bit of Falling Down, with Michael Douglas, a little bit of Point Break, obviously because of the surfer aspects. When he first walks down the beach, it's basically like the part in Point Break where he says, go back to the valley, man.
Yeah, that in fact, we were making the joke that maybe Nicolas Cage was actually Bodhi, having survived the giant wave at the end of Point Break.
Yeah, he would be Roach. He would be
right.
Bodhi. I can't handle the cage, man. So Bodhi definitely went, but maybe Roach survived his gunshot from Gary Busey and ended up, having a son and moving to Australia. I thought that the movie was interesting because the photography of it was perfectly fit. So I was talking about form and content earlier, and the form of the movie, the way that it looks, really conveyed the content. So we have this, and there was a real juxtaposition. We have like a darkness happening inside of characters and it's soaked in sunlight. So it shows you that this, initiation, gaslighting, manosphere, a real Luciferian character doesn't always have to be in darkness. It can be in blinding sunlight. And again, a lot of it reminded me of weirdly of Narnia, just because it deals with archetypal themes here, where you have a character who is a real type of Satan character who's offering things to you that will satiate your appetite, but your appetite becomes an appetite for destruction and you can't actually find the things that are meaningful to you, which are service, and love for someone else. And the characters become sort of wrapped up in themselves. But I really liked it. I thought it was an interesting film.
Now to get into the actual story, and this is just my first glance thought. I could be wrong because there were a lot of details, a lot of pieces to the puzzle to try to keep up with. And I like that puzzle element of it. We keep getting clues as to what's actually going on, but we also get misdirection that tells us maybe we don't know what's going on. So we think that initially we've got this wealthy, divorced, separated Nick Cage character who's wanting to get this childhood home that he had or grew up nearby or whatever that he always liked. And he's not based in Australia, but he was there when he was young. So he's taking his son back there and he wants to impress his son and show him that, hey, this is where I served. This is what you need to do. Kind of wanting to lead his son into some form of manhood, to initiate his son into manhood. And his son is not really interested in surfing as much as Nick Cage is. They try to go to this beach and it's very territorial. You're not welcome here. Get out of here, foreigner, etc. And you can't reason with them. We find out later it's almost kind of a cult. It's a surf cult gang. And Nick Cage's son disappears for the next several days. And as Nick Cage tries to settle this deal on this house, he keeps getting distracted and wrapped up in the drama of the parking lot of the beach and the cult of surfers on the beach, which is, like you said, some form of corporate red pill manosphere retreat for elites, we think. But we start getting clues that maybe Nick Cage isn't all there. He increasingly does bizarre, odd activities and behavior that suggest perhaps he's just getting, heat sickness or some sort of, the sun's getting to him? Or is he actually dissociative? We don't exactly know. He encounters a bum. The bum seems to act very odd. And then we get other teenagers showing up that also sort of taunt both the bum and Nick Cage. Things get worse and worse and worse. It starts to turn into, it kind of reminded me, and it is kind of a dark comedy as well. The Martin Scorsese film from the 80s, the comedy where it just gets, it's that one guy's really
King of comedy.
No. The character's having like the worst night ever, and it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
It's a really good dark satire from Scorsese, which he doesn't do many of, but something time.
Not the one with Rupert Pupkin. It's the other one. I know what you're talking about.
It's escaping me, but anyway, it's reminiscent of that because it just gets worse and worse and worse. And they keep pushing Nick Cage. You think he's going to snap. You're going to get pure Cage, but you don't get it as soon as you think. I know I'm rambling, but so this is kind of giving the basics of the story. And then we get the idea that, no, actually, this is all an initiation for Nick Cage to be led into this elite retreat. And he doesn't remember signing up for it because he's so exhausted and,
After Hours?
That's it, After Hours. So it's a lot like After Hours. And he's basically dissociating perhaps because of the heat and the exhaustion, the lack of water and food, but we don't know.
Well,
but my thesis was that Nick Cage is the bum. The bum is the real character, and you see this when he flashes into the mirror in the bathroom, when he looks in the rearview mirror of the bum's car, and it's almost like the life that the bum would have had the bum's son lived. He did not live. And there's other things that happen that let us know that the son isn't real. The son is never there for the majority of this, even though they're supposed to be there to get this house. And the son just appears out of nowhere towards the third act, riding his bicycle. So that lets us, I think, know that this is not a real son. And we see the newspaper clipping of the son who had died. We know that the bum blames the lead surfer guy for killing his dog. So there's all these indicators that the whole phenomena is the bum eventually snapping, and that Nick Cage, as the realtor, is the life that the bum believed that he should have, is a sort of a dissociative thing. And he was willing to die at the end because he had lost his son. I mean, that's kind of my thought, but I could be wrong about that.
I thought it reminded me a lot of that movie, The Game, with Michael Douglas and Sean Penn.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah.
Because he's put through almost the exact same type of situation where everybody around him puts him into this alternate reality, and he starts to question his own sanity. And remember that the driving force for that movie was that Michael Douglas's character is a successful corporate guy,
right,
with this kind of, dualistic brother played by Sean Penn, who is free to do anything he wants and is part of a secret society that's going to teach him what it means to be human again.
right.
And it's all driven by the fact that his father had unalived himself in front of him at the estate. And so the rest of the movie it sort of centers on whether he is his own father, whether he's becoming his own father.
Right.
And I think this film kind of, I went through a similar thing because, I mean, when he starts to go into the bathroom and like, somebody puts a gun up on the thing and then he goes and finds it. And, he goes all the way down to the depths and he's like drinking out of puddles and he's eating rats and all this stuff. And then he's living in the Subaru. And I started to think, is he the bum?
Yeah.
But then I thought, is he both the bum and he is himself? So I think he is himself. But to others, he is a type of bum character. And that's sort of what they're trying to create, this sort of insular society where they keep the riffraff out. And to them, it's worth it to sort of push this thing where he doubts his own sanity and he becomes that, because he may not be that on the outside, but on the inside, he's certainly that. With his son disappearing, when they first get there and he walks down with his son, the first confrontation he has with the main guy Scally, he's a scallywag, is he says to him, look, mate, you don't want me to bust your chops in front of your son or whatever. And because it's an ultimately, a demeaning thing. And his son is already embarrassed to go with him. But when his son disappears, that sort of said to me that his family has abandoned him, and he's also abandoned his family in the same way that his father abandoned him at the beginning. So is he repeating the cycle that his father did when he sees this flash at the end of the film where he sees his father sort of on the beach dead? But is this a redemption cycle where he is, because regardless of anything that happens, the film does end with him being initiated, but then giving, he doesn't, unlike the other guys who are just, again, trying to feed their appetite or who are ultimately self-serving. He doesn't do that at the end of the film. He offers to take the place of his son. And he's found himself now that he is, like Edmund in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe that I'm covering. There's not a time his whole life before this where he hasn't been totally self-serving. Now he's finally thought of someone else besides himself. And that seems to save him at the end of the movie. But regardless of that, that doesn't disqualify the fact that for most of the film, I mean, he essentially is if he isn't the bomb already, he becomes it.
Yeah. I mean, I saw it as a revenge story, as a redemption story. Because definitely at the end, I think we see, the real estate character, Nick Cage, getting away with his son. Yeah. And that's whatever was real or not real with the bomb who lost his son. That's what he envisioned was, I want my life with my son where I get to surf with him. And that was all taken from me.
Yeah.
And either way, it's a kind of a revenge redemption story. And I like that we were just sort of led through this mental maze, of hysteria and dementia to that end point of redemption at the end with the character. I haven't seen a movie like that in a long time. And I think you're right to liken it to the game.
Yeah. It has elements of Masons, or, remember what are they, the Stone Masons in The Simpsons, where like the cops are the Masons, right? Everybody is part of the thing. And it's very seductive in the movie because at times, I don't know if you guys felt this, but watching the movie, I kind of felt like, oh, maybe these guys aren't so bad at times. I mean, they've got it's a group of buds. They're surfing. They got their little shack. It's cool. They're doing what they want to do. And then there's a scene where they're all dressed nice and they have their families and they're like, this is a part of our thing. But then it goes wrong when he gets down there and talks to them and he figures out that the guy made the girl have the abortion. They eliminated one of the other guys in the group. They're clearly doing very like Skittles stuff when they're together, doing this sort of like, remember the ad a few years ago where like the women went into the woods and they were like, they had the sticks and they were like hitting the sticks on the ground and screaming and they were trying to like interface with their primal womanhood. It was like that, but for dudes. And it was very weird. Also, what's the deal with like the red cape dress thing that the guy was wearing? It was clearly Satan. I mean, he's clearly, this guy shows up in a red robe. He's clearly Satan, Well,
when there's the flashback scene, is it not that main guy? Is he not there amongst the crowd as well?
Yeah, I guess he's always been there.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I think he was, which is telling us like, he's an archetypal character.
Yeah. And I think that these sort of things are seductive for people in the sense that when you look at any authoritarian or any, look at the 20th century and look at authoritarian movements, one thing that they do come down to is the fact that they sell themselves on the fact that they want to make life safe and peaceful for their people. So they want to make it so that people can go to the store and not get assaulted. They don't get bums, hobo demons trying to sell them stuff or ask them questions everywhere they go. They want things clean. They don't want trash sitting all around. So that's very seductive, but it depends on what the motivation is and what you're willing to do for that. And whether it is, to ultimately, I guess, to serve Christ, or whether this is to serve yourself, and to have this thing where you steal this poor guy's surfboard and you're sitting down there like, what is it? Surfer. What is it, Jamie? Surfer is suffer.
Yeah, right.
That's it. Yes.
It's like Bodhi's cult turned dark, right?
Yeah.
Remember, Bodhi had a cult too, and it was like that.
Well, Bodhi had that whole speech about these people don't understand, man. Driving around in their metal coffins, they'll never be in touch with their true.
That's a great line. And I'm pretty sure too, he mentions the Federal Reserve too. When they're in the van, doesn't Bodhi mention like they're all being lied to, and that, you know, they're under the tyranny of the Federal Reserve and blah blah blah.
Yeah. Well, he's the spiritual leader. He's the, who's that? She says, who's that? That's Bodhi, the Bodhisattva. He's a real searcher. What's he searching for? The ride, the ultimate ride.
Right.
He's a spiritual leader for them, who in the end wants to converge with the 50-year storm, because he can't handle a cage, and they're willing to do anything to finance the the endless summer.
The ultimate sort of like extreme adrenaline rush, right?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because Gary Busey in that film was in it wasn't Endless Summer, but Gary Busey was in the other surfer movie that movie is taken from when he was in the 60s. But yeah, it's another thing where, you get a character, Johnny Utah, who comes from a normal place, initiates himself into, by the way, his first job. It's always the first job. It's like Clarice, or it's like Longlegs. It's the woman's it's the woman's first day on the job, and she finds the serial killer.
Meets the serial killer. Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I thought this one was good, and I'm always tempted to think of something like Mandy with this, because whenever Nicolas Cage has a sort of freak out, in an alternate reality and goes on you have to say, he did defend himself in the movie. He wasn't a simp in the movie and sort of just taking whatever beating they gave him. He did defend himself. He punched that guy when he went down to the beach, and, but all the little things in the movie I thought were really great. Like the watch, just give me a drink. And the guy's like, well, I need your watch. And so now it's this little thing that he's tied to, but then everyone else, and then the people in line behind him are like, I'll pay for it. Don't worry about it. I got it. And then, so now that's how everyone in the place sees him.
Yeah.
So I thought it was pretty well done.
Yeah, I agree. I loved it. I want to rewatch it and kind of pay attention to the clues and see where it goes. But thank you for coming on, BLA. It was a great discussion. I'll upload this and tell everybody, remind you guys, be sure and follow Baselit Analyzer at his channel. I got him linked in the show description, so check him out. He's got a ton of great analyses over there, from everything from The Road to Shakespeare to Narnia, which is awesome. I've been wanting to do Narnia too for a long time, so very cool that you're getting to it. I'll have to check those out. And then be sure and follow Jamie over at her channel as well, as she does some breakdowns and finishes her book. And Esoteric Hollywood 3 will be out soon. Anything you want to leave us with?
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate it. Everybody go to my channel, Baselit Analyzer. I'm doing a multi-part series on Narnia right now, all 7 of the Narnia books, plus the biographies of C.S. Lewis. Then I'm going to do the space trilogy, Until We Have Faces. So a lot of C.S. Lewis. So come on over for a lot of literary and film analysis. That's it.
All right. Thank you guys so much, everybody. Have a good night.